It's called idea sex.
Right.
It's what I talk about in my special. That's the idea. I have an idea, you have an idea. Maybe we put our ideas together and somebody gets pregnant.
Do you think?
I mean, no pun intended.
Yeah. He's got
You could rob a
perspective.
bank with that accent.
I
You could
know.
walk in and go, I'm sorry,
Pardon?
I don't have a gun, but give me all your money, please.
Yeah, please put the money in the bag. Yeah,
Put the
that's
money.
it.
Put all the money. God. Unfortunately, we're living in a time where I don't think our government represents us.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us feel powerless. Most of us feel as though we don't have an ability to make a difference.
Many of you who follow me know that I was definitely probably the first person who spoke out against the Me Too movement. When the Me Too movement started trending on Twitter, both the left and the right thought that this was a protected space and a conversation, a platform for women to come out and speak about sexual assault in the past. Now, I immediately spoke out against it, not because I think it's a good thing when women are sexually assaulted, not because I think it's a good thing if women are raped, but because I also think it is a bad thing if men are accused of crimes and forced to deal with the penalties of those crimes without due process. What I saw really trending on Twitter was a bunch of women saying things happened and these women being applauded and men being castigated without any further exploration into the allegations against them. Now, of course, even though left and right agreed with this when it was trending, we saw the right break away from this, conservatives realizing that it was, in fact, problematic when we got to the trial of Brett Kavanaugh. A 30-plus-year-old allegation, zero proof, and yet this man was virtually hung in front of the world. For me, as a Black American, it was reminiscent of the things that I learned about the Civil Rights era, when white women could make allegations and simply be believed on the basis of their word. My ancestors got hung. Here to discuss this and more with me, I have comedian Bryan Callen.
Yes.
I really want to talk to you about, because you unbelievably are probably the closest person I'm going to get to be able to speak to something reminiscent, at least, of the Brett Kavanaugh situation, where you as a comedian had an allegation from 21 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is happening in the present right now.
Yes, it is.
21 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And a young woman says something happened 21 years ago.
Well, not young, now.
Was young, I guess,
Sure.
21 years
Sure.
ago, and then now made an allegation against you, and wham, you got canceled.
Yes. Everything goes away.
Everything goes away. Overnight, an allegation.
Everything, yeah.
Was it proved? Was there? No.
No, and the problem is that whenever something like that happens and it's 21 years old, the only thing you can do, really, is go, no, I didn't. What else are you going to do? No, I didn't. And what's interesting is that most people say, you just got to, the only way to fight this, sometimes they say, is to just disappear. No, I won't. I know who I am. The people that know me know who I am. And so sometimes you define yourself along the lines of what you're willing, you define yourself based on what you're willing to fight for. And by the way, die for sometimes on that hill.
Right.
I'm sorry to be dramatic, but that's who are you in moments of chaos? These are just ideas, man. Whenever I hear someone talking about power and everything is power, and you hear these academics talking about that, the world is just power structures, and I'm tyrannical because obviously I'm a straight white male and I'm at the top of the pyramid and I've got all this unearned privilege. I understand, but as soon as I hear those kind, when you're putting the world into these neat little boxes. Well, I know who you read. I can just see the Austrian school of economics. I can see Mancuso. I can see all the people that you've read. And those are just ideas that were put into your brain and you've held on to. Why? Not so much because they make sense, but because they make you feel safe. Mm-hmm. They make you feel significant, and they make you feel virtuous.
Right. And people don't like having their safe spaces challenged because it can take away from your self-virtue.
That's right, which is why you should go to stand-up comedy. And we can take a hammer and break that little egg that you've been living in. And you might evolve a little bit as a person, whether you're on the right or on the left. Don't be so attached to your ideas.
Right. And it's funny that you say that because, of course, Dave Chappelle came after me in a stand-up.
He did?
Skit. He did.
Well, congratulations, by the way, though.
Thank
Because
you.
You're part of the zeitgeist.
And to be honest with you, when I saw it, I didn't actually think the content of what he said was funny. He just was like, he sort of wanted to assault me in my lady parts. But as I was trending on Twitter about this, and there, everyone's coming after me, waiting for me to be upset, the first thing I said was, this is Dave Chappelle. He is saying my name on stage. He's one of the greatest comedians that's ever lived. Yeah. A, it's a compliment, right, to me.
Yes, it
and
is.
B, I've spent my entire career defending the right for people to say what they want. I, of course, am not going to attack him for saying what he wants. I really do believe we need more of this. I'm happy to be offended if we're all ready to be offended.
Right.
And it just completely shut up they just didn't know what to do with it, because it was sort of this moment where they needed me to be offended. And instead I chose to say like that, we need more of that, you know?
Good for you.
Yeah.
'Cause that's exactly right.
But he's a comedian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What are you expecting from him? Like, what am I supposed to say? Turn off the TV. This is abhorrent that he would say this. And as a feminist, people need to stand up and defend me.
Look, you might be offending a lot of people. You're also emboldening a lot of people. You also give a lot of people faith, because you have guts. Everybody I know in my family, They when they found out I was doing the show, they were so excited, and I was too, because I think you have a great deal of courage. You speak your mind. I love watching you on these clips when you're in Congress and things like that, because you're so clear, you're so articulate, and you have a point of view, a strong one, and you speak your mind. That may be disturbing. Thank God. Thank God we have dissenting opinion.
Right.
Because that's very important. That's kind of the point of having Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
That's almost what the framers wanted, which was government to move slowly. So we had these debates. Do you think there weren't arguments when they were drafting the Constitution? Do you think there weren't arguments when they were drafting the Bill of Rights? You don't think the people had a point of view and they were fighting it out and they came to a compromise? It's called idea sex.
Right.
It's what I talk about in my special. That's the idea. I have an idea. You have an idea. They may not be. There's some truth in your idea. Some useful parts of that idea, and the same with yours. But we haven't figured out the whole thing. Maybe we put our ideas together and somebody gets pregnant.
Do you think?
I mean, no pun intended.
Yeah. Do you think comedians are losing their spine a little bit?
They're afraid.
They
afraid.
are.
I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, I think everybody's really afraid. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've had very powerful people call me and tell me this, because the truth is, it's very easy to destroy someone's life and take everything away from them, everything they've worked for. Happened to me, and it's happened to a lot of people I know. And it doesn't take any proof. It takes an allegation. It takes a tweet. And, people think when you get fired for a tweet you sent out 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you were joking around, there is no redemption online. And it's when you have a mortgage and you have children to pay for, you're going to choose that course. You're going to choose to protect your ability to keep that roof over your head, your car payments, and your children in school over an ideology. So what happens is, we are living in this time where you're not allowed to speak your mind. You're not allowed to get closer to the truth. You better be on one side, or you better be very quiet. And now you can't even be quiet. Now with this notion of critical race theory and stuff, even silence is violence, right? It's just what's going on. There are some very bad ideas out there. Well, you're undeniable. You're uncancelable. Well, your husband has that fantastic. There's always that sort of wonderful.
He always sounds correct.
Of course, he sounds like an aristocrat. I've always said it's something fantastic about having that kind of power.
Lovely,
Of course, he's got blonde hair and he's tall and he's high
handsome.
cheekbones. I want to be an aristocrat. I want to have an accent like that.
People always wonder what can temper me, and that's it. It's his little English accent. And I'm like, oh, all right, he's got a
He could rob a bank with that accent. He could walk in and go, "I'm sorry, I don't have a gun, but give me all your money, please, Empress."
Please put the money in the bag. Yeah, that's it.
Put all the money. I could hear him talk all day.
I know. I got to do another episode with him.
Have you done an episode with him?
I have. I've done one.
I'm going to go to sleep to that episode.
Every woman was like, oh, I get why she's married to this guy. And
Come on.
I don't know if he said anything profound. I think he just was like, hey, yeah, I'm
Well, I didn't know
Candace.
he was your husband. He walked in and he was very quiet and standing there. And I was like, what's with the blonde hair and the accent? I feel bad about myself. Well, art's always, I think good art has always been something that disturbs. You know, especially satire. Satire was always something that rulers were terrified of. Cartoonists and you know, I mean, I think there's a lot of power in being able to point out the contradictions in human behavior. And all of us are a walking contradiction to an extent. So, you know, Bill Burr went crazy on Saturday Night Live. And there were plenty of people saying, you know, my whole family walked out when we heard this. Good. It's all good. That's the American way. You have a right to walk out. You have a right to be disturbed. You have a right to boo. But for the most part, what's great about being allowed to just speak your mind, it's called original self-expression. And if you feel like you're going to get in trouble, if you feel like your livelihood is going to be affected by speaking your mind, by who you're making fun of, I think we're all in trouble because stand-up is still the last, I really believe stand-up is the last bastion of free speech.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
It's about getting rid of your enemies.
Right.
That people you disagree with. See, there's very effective ways to get rid of the people you disagree with, the people you think are keeping, I suppose, a systematically racist or whatever it might be society in place. You can do it with finding out what they said and mounting, you know, enough of an opposition online where the corporations don't want to deal with it.
You can't say, for example, all lives matter. This is a perfect example.
You'll get fired.
Right? So now,
you'll get fired.
Saying all lives matter. So we both agree that what used to mean a bundle of sticks got used during the 80s during a horrific time and gay people lived through a horrible thing and this word went away, right? Mm-hmm. Now, they're trying to liken that to saying all lives matter. And they're firing people, getting rid of people for using the expression all lives matter. These are 3 English words. Yeah. Nobody who's saying all lives matter means I hope Black people die and suffer at the hands of police officers. But they're now taking that, and this is this is the slippery slope of allowing words that have actual meaning to be taken and by the political correctness gods and interpreted into something that you don't actually mean.
They are wrong. Think about journalists who opine and predict. They can say whatever they want. And think about academics who come up with these marginalized, these theories that have not been tested. I mean, whether it's white privilege or whatever it might be. Critical race theory that goes back to these are narratives that used to be on the fringes of academia, but you have especially in the social sciences, you've got these academics that have been able to purify their echo chamber. They just have. There isn't enough opposition. There isn't any idea sex going on. I've interviewed. I used to have a podcast. I interviewed probably 500 academics, smart people. The orthodoxy and the terror they had of stepping outside of what was expected of their speech was palpable. It was incredible. And the vast majority of them, if they weren't Marxists, they were at least socialists. You can learn things by listening, by observing, and by reading. But there are some things you can only learn by doing. Think about fighting. You can be cage side and call fights for 100 years. You can predict fights. You can know the fight game. That never means you can take what you know here and put it in your body and get in and slip punches and hit.
Right.
I could teach you all you wanted about stand-up comedy. The only way to be good at stand-up comedy is by being really bad for a long time. Mm-hmm. You have to learn through the pain of adjustment. The way you catch a ball, you can't read how to catch a ball. The way you do surgery. Can you imagine you're about to go under the knife and the surgeon goes, I've read about this. I've watched a bunch of tape. You're my first patient. Oxygen. Yeah, you'd freak out. So there are people, though, who are in power, whether they're foreign policy experts talking about regime change, whether they're academics pushing these narratives on our schools, whether they are politicians who don't pay a price, economists who've never made a business work, who live in a world of theory. They've never had to learn something at the pain of adjustment. They've actually never had to do something. They've been living in a world of theory. They have a lot of power. They're very articulate. And somehow they've gotten into a position where they can push narratives on the rest of us. This is all from the book. But it made so much sense.
Yeah.
And when they're wrong, we spent $6 trillion and counting on these Middle East wars. $6 trillion since 2011. Who's signing those checks? What am I getting for my money? Unfortunately, we're living in a time where I don't think our government represents us. Mm-hmm. Most of us feel powerless. Most of us feel as though we don't have an ability to make a difference. Unless you're someone like Candace Owens, by the way. And I'm not kidding. Because all of a sudden, one of the great things about social media, there's a lot of trappings, but one of the great things about social media is at least there are people like you who get up there and start telling the truth.
Right.
And guess what? A lot of people agree with you, and a lot of people listen to you. How interesting.
Yeah.
Even though Twitter, I'm sure, goes crazy on you, most people are like, she's got a point.
Well, and that's why I speak out, because I'm realizing more and more what we're seeing, exactly what you're talking about, particularly, I think, the academia with this push for political correctness and the perversion of actual American phrases and American words. They can make anything. I mean, they are now saying the Pledge of Allegiance. The USA chant is racist, right? You get what I'm saying? Like, so these things were okay. Now they're not okay. How many words are we going to be left with that are okay for us to say when they can look into some deeper meaning?
They're making a
and
huge
see
mistake.
and see some oppression.